And hello everyone, today I'm in Falmouth, Jamaica, and we just pulled into port here aboard the cruise ship, the Norwegian Star. And one of the first things that strikes me is the extensive damage throughout the city. And recently, Jamaica was struck by a Category 5 hurricane on October 28th, and that was Hurricane Melissa, with sustained winds of 185 miles per hour and gusts up to 252 miles per hour. So this was just a massive hurricane that's hit Jamaica, and explains why so many of these structures, such as the building there in the center, a very nice colonial style looking building, is just completely missing its roof, as is other structures to the left. So there is quite extensive damage even just right here in port, and likely there's going to be more damage throughout the rest of the city of Falmouth. And some background information on the city and Jamaica. Jamaica is located in the Caribbean Sea, about 90 miles south of Cuba and about 500 miles from Florida. Falmouth was founded in the year 1769 and was named after another Falmouth in Cornwall, England, which was the birthplace of then Governor of Jamaica, a Sir William Trelawney. During this time, Jamaica was a British colony, and it wouldn't completely gain its independence until the year 1962. Today, Falmouth is a busy cruise and shipping port and welcomes nearly 1 million cruise passengers each year. Though the city itself remains rather small, with a total population of only 8,600 people, while the entire island of Jamaica has a population of over 2.8 million. And to start my day, I signed up for a city tour and then a rum tasting. Unfortunately, the city tour was a bit of a disappointment, as we only stopped at 2 different places in Falmouth and were rushed back on the bus both times, so I didn't really get a chance to see much of the city with the tour. And instead, when we got back to port, I walked around the city myself, and the experience was quite interesting. Anyhow, for the tour, the first stop was an abandoned church. This is St. Peter's Church, which was built in 1795 and is the oldest public building in Falmouth. Though the church survived the hurricane mostly intact, it was later destroyed by a fire. However, even before the fire, it was said the church was in much disrepair. There are reports vandals had damaged many of the monuments in the churchyard, windows were broken in places, and the clock in the tower was broken, which after 200 years of service, I guess, is to be expected. A fund was established to help make the necessary repairs, which raised a total of about $10,000, and that was back in 2009. Then, in October of this year, Hurricane Melissa passed through Jamaica, and the building was likely strong enough to withstand a hurricane, but whatever roofing or interior wasn't damaged by the storm. The fire, however, completely destroyed. And it's really sad to see such a big, beautiful building in ruin. Hopefully a new church just as nice can be built in its place. And getting back to the tour, we next stopped at an old courthouse in town, but I'm not sure I would consider this a stop, as only one other person got off the tour bus and we were there for like about 30 seconds. However, I was able to revisit this area, as it's right next to the cruise port terminal, and I will get to more on that later. Then we began our journey to Bamboo Beach, which is about 15 miles outside of town. Overall, I thought Bamboo Beach was nice. There's lots of places to sit, and they also provided complimentary rum tasting, which is probably why many people signed up for the tour in the first place. I'm not really a hard liquor drinker myself, so I can't provide a good review on the rums per se, But the first rum they started us out on was about 65% alcohol, which was a very strong drink, to say the least. And I think it probably would have been flammable if anyone was smoking nearby. And not everyone finished drinking their shot, or at least I wasn't able to myself. However, some of the other rums were more palatable, and it seemed like our group was having fun at this point. One thing I found a little strange was when I asked some of our group members if they thought the city tour was too short. Most people didn't seem to care too much about seeing any more of the city and were more interested in the beach. I guess it's all a personal preference. However, I was a lot more interested to just see how the average Jamaican lives and what life is like in Jamaica. So I'll get to more on my own personal tour of the city a little later. And also, some people were rather concerned about their personal safety, especially with it being so soon after Hurricane Melissa passed through. So I asked our tour guide how safe she thought Falmouth was to walk around, and she said it would be perfectly fine, which in general is probably an overstatement, but given there was one other cruise ship in port, there were probably just as many tourists in town as there were locals. So I again decided to venture out when we returned to the port. And I should also point out, where the cruise port is located is a rather secure area that is gated off with armed security guards walking around. So that one area is safe, and the shops in the port look quite a bit newer and in general better maintained than most of the rest of the surrounding area that's around the port. So once you leave the port gates, it's a rather different story. For example, when I left myself, I saw a couple, man and a woman, in front of me who were followed by a salesperson for about a block, and I heard them say to the salesperson that they had nothing to pay him with, and the salesperson was trying to sell a walking tour, and I'm not sure if this is really the best answer to give if you're not interested. I guess it will work, but I just politely say no thanks. I think being polite is the best policy. But I could also understand that they were probably tired of being followed, at least at some point. So if you don't mind taking a little bit of a chance, I thought the walk around town was rather interesting, just seeing how the ordinary Jamaicans live and some of what they have to deal with every day, and especially after the hurricane which passed through the prior month. And the country of Jamaica also has a rather interesting history. Most of the people you see here on the streets are not indigenous to Jamaica per se. The first inhabitants to Jamaica were the Tainows, who began occupying the island around the year 800 AD, or about 1200 years ago, and at their peak reached a total population of approximately 60,000 people. The Tainows were thought to have lived on Jamaica relatively undisturbed until the arrival of Christopher Columbus in the year 1494, when Columbus claimed the island of Jamaica for Spain. This began the process of Spanish colonization, the introduction of slavery, first with the Tainows themselves being enslaved to work on the plantations, and then when the local population was depleted due to diseases, illness, or death at the hands of the Spanish, slaves from Africa began being imported to replace the Tainows. The Spanish would later be forced out of Jamaica by the English in the 1600s, and the English would continue on much the same course by further colonizing Jamaica and importing even more slaves from Africa to work on the sugar and coffee plantations on the island. By the time slavery was abolished over 200 years later, in the year 1838, the census for Jamaica included 15,000 whites, 40,000 freed blacks, 40,000 free people of colored background or mixed race, and over 311,000 slaves. The country's original inhabitants, the Tainows, were by then all extinct. Though some traces of Tainau lineage still exist, over the centuries most of their cultures and heritage has been completely lost. And then following the abolition of slavery, Jamaica's sugarcane industries went into decline as they were no longer economically viable with other countries which still practiced slavery. And today, the Jamaican economy is much more diversified. The country's top revenue generators include tourism, with over 4.1 million visitors to the island each year. Mining, Jamaica is one of the largest producers of aluminum oxide, with a yearly production valued at over $500 million, as well as the export of a variety of agricultural products, including bananas, coffee, coconuts, oranges, grapefruits, and sugarcane, just to name a few. And I think as far as the tourism industry goes, 4 million visitors, that sounds kind of low for a large country like Jamaica. And I think what's hurting their tourism is the perception that there's a lot of crime in Jamaica, which unfortunately is rather true. Jamaica does have a rather high murder rate. However, I have found that if you're in, say, the port here of Falmouth, that it appears to be relatively safe. I'm not sure if I'd want to walk around town, say at night or when all the cruise ships leave. However, during the day and when there's other tourists out, it seemed like it was okay. I was walking around for at least a good 2 to 3 hours, and I didn't have any problems myself. However, when I did get back to the boat, I did hear some stories of some unfriendly locals and whatnot. And it wasn't anything major, but it just sounded like, some people weren't the most friendly. So I could kind of see where Jamaica kind of has that reputation of high crime, as well as, a bit unfriendly. However, I think as long as you travel in a group and just follow some common sense practices, I think overall you'll probably be okay. And I found that my brief visit here was rather interesting. Anyhow, that will conclude my tour of Falmouth, Jamaica, and thank you for watching.